students, you're welcome to government class. With you today is Ms. Wokoma Tamno. I'll be taking you on the theme political concepts and principles. I'll be looking at the topic government as an institute of the state. I guess you used to the word, or you know the term. You've heard of people saying the government of the people, government of the state, Have you ever wondered or pondered on what government actually is? A quick one. A long time ago, we had no government. We had nothing called government or a system called government. People just existed on their own, tried to meet up and take care of their affairs on their own. But as time went on, people began to come together, they lived together, they associated with one another, and even started having different forms of organization. As a result of this, disputes and disagreements came up. And so they sought for someone or some persons who could help them manage their affairs, control their activities, all in one. And so the need for government arose. Do you know, even in your school, you have the government structure where you have your school authorities, you have your principal, you have your teachers, all of them positioned in different respective offices to bring about a well-organized school. Today, every country adopts one form of government or the other. Maybe the democratic system of government, some adopt the parliamentary system of government, and the likes, to rule, lead, and also control the affairs of the state and the people. This takes us to the definition of government. We're going to be looking at government as a whole from three different dimensions of perspectives. We're going to be seeing government as an institution of the state, as a process or act of governing. We're going to be seeing it as an academic field of study. Let us treat this first. Government as an institution of the state. This simply means a body that is set up by the state in order to organize and coordinate the state, manage its affairs, and also to help it execute its numerous functions and responsibilities. And in carrying out these functions and responsibilities, the government decided or has a structure known as the organs of government in carrying out these various responsibilities. Let's see what they are. The organs of government are the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. The legislature, this is the body that makes law in the states. It's saddled with that responsibility. And in Nigeria, the body saddled with this responsibility, for example, is the National Assembly, which is made up of two houses, the upper house known as Senate and the lower house known as the House of Representatives. They come together, go through sessions, and carry out the policies whereby they make laws from them. The Judiciary. This is the body that interprets the laws. Laws made by the legislatures are interpreted by the judiciary, and then they punish lawbreakers. I believe you have heard and seen persons like the lawyers, judges, magistrates, and even barristers. These persons fall in this category of the organ of government that makes the law. And then the executive is the body that implements the law. This implementative body is made up of persons like the police, the army, air force, navy, even the president, the vice president, and the ministers. They all make up this body. What they do is when the laws are made, they actually carry it out. They implement it or enforce these laws. This is a typical case of a session being held by the lawmakers. This is the police force. Like we all know, fall under the implementative body, the executive arm, and this, lawyers, under the judiciary arm of government, where laws are interpreted. And so let's look at the characteristics of government. There are certain things that must be in place for government to carry out its responsibilities effectively, one of which is law. The government must possess well laid down clear rules and regulations with which they use to regulate the affairs of the people and the state. They regulate the activities, the behaviors, and even the beliefs of the people. These laws made by the government are laws that are also enshrined in the Constitution. For example, in Nigeria, if you want to know where the laws, or you want to see or find where our laws are, you go to our 1999 Constitution. You know, all our laws are embedded in such. It's just where the government has rights, you know, to come up with laws to shaping the activities of the people. Political power. The government must possess political power to enable it carry out its policies and also persuade the citizens to obey the laws of the land. For instance, let's see where there's an issue, say, okay, insecurity in the states. You know, the government has that political power to come up with policies that will bring about development and security in the state. How? The government might, for instance, take up a policy and say everybody should be in their houses. From 6 o'clock, nobody comes out. You know, because the government has given that and he has political powers to make such laws, everyone will ensure that they are in the houses by that time. Else, people found out will be punished for such acts. And we know that the people that do this are the police. That's why you see them in such situations. They're all out searching for people that will go against the rule or against the laws made by the state. Personnel. This just talks about qualified persons that execute the responsibilities given to them by the government. They carry out the lawmaking process. They also implement these laws, and they interpret the law and punish lawbreakers. These persons, like we know, for an effective administration to be achieved, there must be qualified personnel involved, people who will carry out their jobs wonderfully. For instance, where we have our judges in the courtroom, if you don't have a good judge, you will know or notice that either he doesn't, in the aspect of giving or ruling over a case, is either he doesn't interpret the laws rightly, or he doesn't give a good verdict concerning that law, or an appropriate verdict concerning that law. So that's one danger of having unqualified personnel. Revenue. This talks about funds, without which the government will not be able to act out their ideas. A government might actually have beautiful ideas, you know, but if they do not have money, funds to bring it out, to play it out, then you might not enjoy it, or you might not even see these beautiful ideas they have. Now, these funds we're talking about are like revenues needed to execute projects, which will bring about development to the state. Take, for instance, like what just happened. The government embarked on a project where it builds schools, public schools, and even healthcare centers, you know, in different states. All of these were done with funds. So without fund, a government can actually be handicapped in carrying out its numerous projects. Social services. It's the responsibility of the government to provide different social services or social amenities for the betterment or development of the state and its people. Take, for instance, electricity, you know, pipe-bomb water, good roads, good public schools, and even healthcare centers. All of these are amenities that the government should be able or is responsible to provide for its citizens. to improve their standard of living. Like what we have on the board. The government has actually provided the pipe-bomb water or the borehole pumps for this community, and you can see they are happy. And this will bring us to the functions of government. Government has so many functions to carry out. We'll be looking at some, one of which is lawmaking. It's the responsibility of the government to make laws, and we all know that the body saddled with this responsibility is the legislature. The government maintains laws, peace, and order in a country. For instance, we see the police trying to maintain order and peace in the country. That's why where you have problems or issues or disagreements and discords, the first people to come and settle issues are the police. Why? Because the government or law has given them that right to ensure peace and order in a state or in a country. And then you see the court also playing its role, how they interpret laws and also maintain the laws made by the legislature. The government also protects lives and properties of citizens and non-citizens who live in the country. Citizens are citizens. Everybody has the right to life. And so it is the responsibility of the government to preserve them, to protect their lives and also protect their properties. When we talk about citizens, not non-citizens, we talk about those ones actually within the territory where the government is ruling. And then, for instance, let's say, okay, for lives and properties, how do they do that? The court interprets the laws and make sure that they actually make citizens understand that stealing or killing is wrong. And so the government has those laws made. The police now goes out to enforce that those laws are obeyed by arresting such people who kill or steal from people. That's why, for example, in Nigeria, where we see people who embezzle or steal government funds, they are always they are either arrested or convicted at the end. You see, that's one other function of the government. Also, the government protects and defends the country from external aggression and internal insurgencies. Take, for example, what's happening in Nigeria, the Boko Haram sect, and even the Niger Delta militant group. They brought about discord and they brought about so much pain to people in the nation. But in all, we still see the government deploying the military to go and arrest such cases, to make sure that those cases are handled and peace is restored in the country. So that's one function of the government too, to protect and defend its countries from external aggressions and internal insurgencies. Government as an institute of the state is established by the state for it to help organize the state and also sustain its existence, the existence of the state. Now, talking about state, what then is a state? A state can be seen as a group of politically organized people occupying a common area with the presence of an organized, legitimate government who must be free from external influence and control. The state actually just talks about having a group of people existing in a particular territory with an organized, legitimate government free from external influence. Referring to a state, I'm referring to the country like Nigeria as a state, not states like Rivers State, Abia State, Enugu, and the rest. We're talking about states like Nigeria, we're talking about states like Ghana, USA, and their likes. Those are the states we're referring to now. This state has some features, some things that must be present in an entity before it can be called a state. Some of them are sovereignty, permanence, government, population, recognition, and territory. We'll be looking at them one after the other. Sovereignty. Sovereignty simply means the highest level of power. And for a state, or an entity rather, to be called a state, it must have that high level of power, which is the supreme power, to make laws and also enable or enforce these laws on its citizens, which must obey these laws. And these laws, like we have stated, must be found or enshrined in the Constitution. These laws must be free from every form of external influence and control. Just like the example I gave, where there's a security issue, and the government has its own powers to come up with policies to address such situations and to also ensure that those laws are enforced on the people, which must obey these laws. Another feature, it's population. There must be a particular number of people occupying that territory before that entity can be called a state. This is a very essential feature. How? They cannot be a state without people, because you cannot say the state is empty. Who is he ruling then, or who is he leading? And so there must be people. And in some countries, or in some states are made up of very large populations, like Nigeria, like USA, like China, while other countries are made up of populations, like smaller populations rather, countries like Namibia, Gambia, and the rest. Those have small populations. And then permanent. This is just to show that the state or the entity must be comparatively permanent. For instance, Nigeria, we know Nigeria is situated here. It's situated in this area. You don't come next year and hear Nigeria has been moved from this point to the other point. No, it's just there where it is, more like static. But the government and administrations that come in can change or must change, especially in a democratic system of government, where like that which we practice, which has 4 years interval. We have a government coming and another go, Like the saying that goes, soldiers come, soldiers go, but the barrack remains the same. For instance, the 2015 election that was held, prior to that election, we had a president who was ruling, and because his tenure was out, another president came in. But when his tenure ended, did the states move? No. We're still in the states. We're still in Nigeria, but we have a new administration. So that's what the states is all about. One feature is it must be permanent. Recognition. It just tells us that the state must gain recognition from its citizens and also from international environments. So it should be internally and externally recognized. For instance, you go to the United States of America, and you want to introduce yourself. Oh, my name is this. I'm a Nigerian. They already know as a Nigerian, you are from Nigeria. It's already been told. That's because the state, Nigeria, is being recognized outside, and even amongst its citizens, we know that Nigeria is a state. The government. The entity must have a government which here plays as a machinery used by the state to organize and manage the affairs of the people. The government maintains also the existence of that state, and so it's very important because that's what keeps the states going. For example, in Nigeria, we have a federal government, we have the state government, we also have our local governments. All of these are in order to bring about organization, good organizations, and to maintain the existence of the states. And then we have territory. A state must have a definite territory. The entity rather must have a definite territory or size, with a limited size, before it can be called a state. The entity must also have a clear boundary. And at times, most countries have their boundaries with mountains, rivers, and their likes, just to set a boundary between them and another state. For example, in Nigeria, we know that Nigeria to the north is bounded by Niger Republic, to the northeast by Lake Chad, and then to the west, Benin Republic, and somewhere close between the south and somewhere below the east, we have Cameroon. And so it just tells you that Nigeria has its own boundaries, which separates it from other countries or states, as the case may be. At this point, I would like to say that the states and government cannot be totally separated. They complement each other. While the state, it's a politically organized persons living in a particular area with a legitimate government free from external influence. The government is the machinery the state uses to organize its affairs and also to sustain its existence. In summary, we talked about government as an institution of the state. We saw it as a structure set up by the government to systemize, to coordinate, to organize the state and manage its affairs. We also talked about different characteristics of the government, where we talked about law, we talked about welfare services or social services, we talked about revenue. And then we looked at different functions of the government. The government makes laws, the government also protects lives and properties of the citizens and non-citizens living in that territory. And then we saw government as an institution of the state being established by the state. And so we looked at what the state is. And we said the state is a group of people living in a common geographical area with the presence of a legitimate government free from external influence. And we looked at some features of the states. We talked about sovereignty, population, permanence, recognition, government, and territory. This brings us to the end of this class. Thank you.